I don't have a rogue Lucasade. Upsetting.
Well, it looks like you are Sisyphus in this case and doomed to follow up on previous week's follow-up. So it looks like you've got yet more to say about things from the last few episodes.
Last week was a rush job on my part, and I missed a couple of very important things. So first of all, those who have not already seen it, if you go to Joe Brown's YouTube channel, link in the show notes, there are a number of Bogglebots bonus videos. Probably the most important of those is the judges' chat after the Clause 2 Annie fight. God, it feels weird bringing that up this episode. It was a long time ago now. So that's one of them. There's also a really nice little supercut of stuff involving us, which we're very grateful to Joe for. All of that will be linked below. I imagine there's more to come as well. So, highly recommend checking Joe's channel out. Loads of good stuff on there. All the Yui stuff is on there. All the Crabsolutely Clawful stuff. All the two-headed Death Flamingo stuff. Superb all around.
Seconded.
Talking of superb creative people, there was some artwork that we forgot to shout out, and that makes me sad. And I'm now going to be anxious over saying someone's name. Nick Cole. Never know if he prefers Nicholas. Nick Cole, the amazing human behind Sir Lancer Frog, did a fantastic... I was going to call it a drawing. I probably shouldn't call it a drawing. A fantastic art, a really good art, of us and Tuberg. It's one of my favourite things that's ever been made. I want it printed. I want it on a t-shirt. I want to buy a van and put it all over the side. It is that good.
It is an amazing art. I agree. I think it's one of the first. It might be. If I get this wrong, I'm really sorry. But I think it's the first thing that's been done, inspired by something that we've done.
In the artistic realm, the sort of visual art realm, I suppose so.
Oh yeah,
we have definitely inspired other actions.
I guess the other one that I should also remember as well is the Hello There video. So.
Oh yes, I was also thinking the full Ratunkti run through, which is a good job someone did.
Oh, and that yeah. I don't know. This is the first bit of artwork that we've seen that's inspired by something that we've done, and that's just wonderful. I really loved seeing it.
Yeah, I'm so upset at myself for missing a chance to shout Nick out for anything. Another thing that I learned just hours before this recording is that Nick does actually have a little bit of Lancer Frog merch, which, as soon as I have money, I will be purchasing a t-shirt. Because I think the Lancer Frog character that he has made, and all the stuff he's been doing with it through the series, is just genuinely beautiful in a way that I don't like expressing, because I don't do feelings, and it makes me feel things.
There's an indictment on modern masculinity.
To be clear, we're not criticising the frog's masculinity.
No, just Ryan's.
Chivalry isn't dead, so Lancer Frog is still here. Speaking of Nick yet again, he also made a very valuable correction for me, which is that Bourbon's wedge fell off before the fight started. Looking back, this was noticeable just. The footage we saw of the wedge falling off was when it was on its way to the starting position, and Shane removed the wedge before the fight started.
Fair enough. Everything makes sense now, and all is right in the world again.
How are you feeling about the comments from last episode?
Oh boy, so I asked for feedback about how people listen to this show, and I got feedback. I was very pleased. I received feedback in multiple places, which was wonderful, and a lot of people don't listen to podcasts the way that I do, which is unsurprising. Well, it should be unsurprising. Yeah, a lot of people listen on the website, and that genuinely blows my mind. And what I find quite kind of funny about that is that I very nearly didn't put a player on the website. I thought, who's going to use that? No one uses that. That'd be ridiculous. And I thought in the end, I spent maybe half an hour in total putting an audio player on the website, thinking that people might use it to listen to 5 minutes of an episode to see if they like it before subscribing somewhere else. So yeah.
What Sam's trying to say is, you're welcome.
No, I think what I'm trying to say, if anything, is I'm sorry for how bad I assume the web player is.
It's good on desktop, slightly iffy on mobile. It doesn't track very well on mobile.
If I get a weekend in search of a project, maybe I'll update it and make it a bit better. And then the other thing that I learned is I think a lot more people than I thought would like Spinnerproof on YouTube. So maybe it will happen. It's still a lot more work. That's the thing. It's a lot more effort to get it on YouTube as well. So we'll see.
If we can find an efficient way of doing it that puts the burden on me rather than you, I think it's a goer.
Yeah.
But as is, you already put a lot more time into this than I do. I put a lot of time into my notes, but that just makes more time for you editing, so... And probably more pain for you in the recording process.
Depends on your notes.
Anyway, I think that's enough meta chat.
I think so, yeah.
We've got a world of pain to enter. Before we get into saying anything about these two rumbles, can we all just sit back and appreciate the fact that it took less than 5 minutes to get into the action, despite there being 10 teams to interview? BattleBots, take some notes. This is how we keep things tight.
What's amazing about this episode, for me especially, is that... So this is an episode with 6 minutes of fights, and that's it. And it's a half-hour-ish long episode, which is the right length. Like, it's a really good pace the whole way through. Like, I think if they tried to make it the 40 to 50-minute one that they normally are, that would have, like what I assume BattleBots would have had to have done in the situation. It would have dragged out and been horrible. But this was like really good pacing the whole way through, even though the majority of it is not fighting. It was, like lots of interviews at a good pace, and they were interesting interviews and stuff. So I think as usual, the production crew behind BattleBots have done a great job with this. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, the pacing on this episode is damn near perfect. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the fights to other stuff ratio, but there is not a single point where it's dragging, probably helped by the fact that we have got judges' decisions to go through.
Yeah.
But superbly done, as ever. And I can't wait to see our Dung Beetle interview. Because I remember that being a lot of fun. Oh, I've just made it about us, damn it.
You can't help
cut
it.
That.
You honestly,
cut
like...
That.
No, I'm not going to cut. I refuse.
I'll allow it because we're on our own platform. Elsewhere, I'll be very disappointed with myself. I'm also stalling because I don't know where to start with this fight.
I mean... Well, we'll start obviously with the 10-way. As usual, we'll do these in the order that they came out. As if we do that any different. I don't know why I'm clarifying that. But I have.
Yeah, let's start with the one that is causally affected by the first one.
I don't know where you start with this fight either. It's insane. So we've got Annie, Are You Okay? Drizzle, Apprentice, Daedalus, Gear Down for What? Bourbon, Sir Lancer Frog, Halo, Wayu, and Unconscious 514, all in the same box, which is utterly mental.
We've been hyping this for a long time. Like I said last episode, maybe we were hyping it before we really should have been. But this is, if only in one way, a really unique rumble, and that is that there's no pit. There's not meant to be no pit, but there is no pit. Which means that everyone that goes out, goes out. And for that reason, we get some gourmet destruction. And it's a shame that had to be overshadowed by a judge's decision.
Should we dive straight into the judge's decision?
I want to just flag up a couple of other really key moments that I loved first.
Go for it.
Within the first 5 seconds, Bourbon has critically damaged 2 robots. Straight through unconscious, taking a wheel off, into gear down and taking the link out. That is an incredible move that was really easy to overlook in the context of everything else. You've then got the flying drumectomy from Drizzle on Bourbon.
Oh my god, yeah.
Which, again, I don't know. Physics has been broken. You've also got Halo. I don't know if they came really close to beating the count by getting off the wall, or if they actually beat it and then just kind of gave up. But either way, that was some intense drama that, in the context of everything else, it's kind of hard to see.
I think what happened is that they sort of came off as Tim was finishing the count, and then he sort of made it clear afterwards, being like, I'll let you carry on. That was, he was sort of like, they could have carried on, I think. Tim would have allowed it.
Everybody gets one.
And I don't know if they decided that they were done at that point because they were missing a wheel, or if they felt like they were out and it would be a bit, and they didn't want to go again for that reason, or they couldn't. I don't know what the reason for them not carrying on at that point was, but I think it was like one of those sort of real edge casey things where the ref made a call and they could have gone on if they wanted to and could, I think.
The other exceptional thing I really want to shout out is just the job that Tim has done keeping track.
Yeah. Well, I think they split it. I think they had some kind of arrangement where Tim was doing a bunch and Shane was doing a bunch as well. Because I'm pretty sure I heard Shane counting at some point. He's just a lot quieter than Tim is.
That would make sense. I thought that had happened as well, but then when I only heard Tim, I went, Tim must have just done it all. I mean, even between two of them, that is a Herculean task.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like, I have no idea how you do that. Like, it's just phenomenal. I think that they've managed to sort of count out and have good order. Like, at no point do I feel like anyone was confused about whether or not, like, particularly confused about whether or not they were in and stuff. Like, they were good about clarifying it and making it very clear who was being counted out and stuff. I also really enjoy the graphic in the top left of the screen for, like, the viewers at home of, like, which robot is being counted out. I think that's a stroke of genius, whoever came up with that. Well done.
The only confusion I think there was at the time for the audience, and of course the audience in this situation are completely secondary to the drivers. The drivers are the ones that need to know what's going on, and I think they did. For the audience, it wasn't completely clear whether Daedalus was still in towards the end.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us were wondering. But that's straying forwards. The other thing that I think has been kind of less noticeable is what Tim says at the end of the Rumble, when it's all done, and he's talking about a battery. I don't know if we're going to get to see this later on. That was Gear Down for What's battery, which got nicked. It basically got a haircut off of Daedalus, which very precisely stripped the foil off of the battery and somehow left all of the cells intact. Gareth was parading that thing around the pits like some kind of trophy before he realised he should probably dispose of it.
Oh my goodness me, yeah. That's insane. That's just such ridiculous. I was going to say precision, which it is precision in some ways, but obviously it's not particularly intentional. It's just insane. Like, it's just amazing that it didn't do any damage to the battery beyond just the foil.
Precision wasn't Daedalus's game in this particular fight. In the next one, it was. In this, the sledgehammer was a sledgehammer. And I suppose we're done with the nice things and we have to talk about this.
I mean, this was a really exciting fight to watch, like, on the day, and it was really exciting to watch on YouTube as well. Like, it was a really good fight.
This is one of the fights that is just hands down better recorded for me, because you can actually tell what on earth is going on.
Well, you could just watch this fight so many times and still spot new things. There's so much going on in it. So dense, every image.
The amount of people that must have watched this at 0.25 speed. Just that, I mean, I have, and I don't know how accurate it is, I have gone through and tried to get rough times for most of the key incidents. The first 30 seconds have 4 robots basically finished. And 2 of those are in the first 5 seconds. It's just ridiculous.
It's insane.
What were your feelings at the time with the decision? Or is this once again I don't remember?
No, I do remember. I know exactly how I felt. I just want to preface this and just say the judges had a tough job here, and I don't think I've seen many, if any, comments like being mean to the judges, but like, don't leave those comments. Like, I'm sure they exist.
I think that's because you don't read YouTube comments.
I've not looked that hard, I will say that. But I'm also aware that they probably exist, and I just want to say that's not cool. Don't do that. It's a hard job. They made a decision, and it's fine. On the day, I felt like Annie was robbed. Watching it again on YouTube, I felt that Annie was robbed. Watching it more closely, I can understand why the judges made the decision they made. This is just a really tough thing where I think there's basically a disconnect between... there's obviously a disconnect between how the viewers think it's judged and how it's actually judged, and a disconnect between the people's winner, if you will, and the winner by the rules and the judgment and stuff. And it's just one of those situations. But I think I can sort of see why it went the way that it did.
I've got on pretty much the same journey. I think I've managed to formulate in my head a viewpoint that I believe the judges had, which makes Daedalus the winner. The problem I have is that for that viewpoint to work, we have to be fighting in a system that I'm not sure I really want to fight in. I don't want to be fighting under a rule set where being Daedalus in this fight can make you the winner without knocking everyone out. And I'm aware how harsh that sounds, and I feel this is an issue we had in another episode. It was an episode we re-recorded, actually, where we were talking about Daedalus versus Dwayne Nibley. And I felt after recording that I'd been quite harsh on Daedalus, purely because of my excitement for the other robot. And Daedalus, by being one of the big dogs, is a robot that I think people are naturally going to root against at times. I think this is one of those times. And that's really harsh on Cosmin, because Cosmin is incredible. He's a ridiculously talented guy who is one of the people on the sort of UK Beetle scene who is really pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible with a spinner. And the amount of people who are kind of, I was going to say riding on his coattails, it's not quite that, it's more the amount of ships being lifted by the tide that he is rising. Grammar.
Another episode of failed analogies.
It's a perfectly good analogy, it's just a little grammatically tricky. He is the rising tide that lifts all ships, that's what I'm saying. And he deserves all of the credit for that. He deserves to be a grand finalist. Hands down. And he would as well, but a grand final without Daedalus would have almost felt wrong. So I am delighted that the results panned out the way they did. I just don't think the result of this fight matches with what we saw. And I hope I've kind of hedged enough there. Not that I want to be hedging, but I think it is really hard for a lot of people, even us at times, to separate the person from the machine. Just because we think that Annie should have won this fight doesn't mean we want to take anything away from Daedalus.
No, not at all. And I think Cosmin was pretty surprised that he got that decision as well. Like, I don't think I don't know. Yeah, I like you. I'm glad to see more Daedalus. I think it's a great robot, and Cosmin's a great guy. But like, we are also allowed to feel like another robot should have won that without it being detrimental to Daedalus.
Another thing I think is really worth pointing out is that the judges spent a long time on this.
Oh, yeah.
It was at least 10 minutes of deliberation between them. They watched the fight back, I believe, twice. Anita had very smartly and proactively decided to film the fight on her phone. So they watched that back a couple of times. They did not take this lightly. They did not find it easy.
No.
I think one of the things that's happening in this fight for a lot of viewers is that it feels really clear-cut for Annie because of the things that a viewer is looking for. So I think a lot of people are almost offended by the idea it's close, and then the fact it goes the other way takes them into rage territory. It is no longer, that is a questionable decision, it is, Annie was robbed! And then everything just turns into a flame war and no one's happy. Which I realise is me accidentally taking a shot at you for using the term robbed earlier.
No, that's fair enough. Like I on the day I wound up to it, I was like, Annie was robbed. I was not happy about that at all. I really, yeah, it was not good. And I felt similarly like it reawakened a bunch of these sort of negative emotions when I first watched the fight again on YouTube as well. I was like, no, that's not right. Like it shouldn't have gone the way that it did. It sort of, it took me to actually stop and step back a little bit and then watch what Daedalus was doing through that fight to sort of try and understand why the judges made that decision. And yeah, so I think it's fair enough what you said.
I don't know how Ben got through the half hour after this fight, because he had a lot of people coming up to him and just straight up saying we didn't agree with that decision. And he remained magnanimous throughout.
Yeah.
He was fantastic about the whole thing. He was disappointed to have lost, but he was also happy to have been part of such an entertaining fight. And most importantly, he accepted that decision.
Yeah.
Didn't like it, but accepted it. To have all these people going, no, mate, that was wrong. He could have so easily gone the other way and no one would have blamed him. So, huge credit to Ben on that. And the machine he's built as well is excellent.
So I feel like you probably have a lot more of a detailed analysis of the fight. So I wonder if I could get in before you and explain why I think that Daedalus got this very briefly, and then I'll let you elaborate with your far more extensive notes.
Do it.
So So I think if you look at Daedalus through this fight, I think they probably do a little bit more damage overall throughout the fight, and they also do disable Annie pretty well right at the end. I think the last hit takes out the drive on one side of Annie, like completely takes it out, and you can sort of see that Annie is just pivoting around that one side of drive. And had the fight gone on another 10 seconds, they would have been counted out. I think that's part of the decision here. I also think that Annie struggled with drive through like the drive seemed a little bit wonky to me through a lot of this fight, and there's moments for both robots where they're sort of sat not doing very much. Daedalus goes for a period of time with the weapon not spinning, for example, and although Annie's sort of like in the action for a lot of it, they're not landing every single hit that they're going for and stuff. So I think it's just little things around control, damage, and aggression, obviously, but like I think it's just really little things around that where I think that Daedalus has the edge on damage and probably on aggression as well. And it's just sort of like I think those are the things that did it. Yeah, I think that is the very short summary of what I think happened there, and I can see it, I can get behind it. I think that it's fine. I do still feel like Annie should have won though.
I see it a little differently. First of all, I think the judges have looked at damage as a snapshot of the word cease. Who is more damaged? They've seen Daedalus missing a wheel, with one side of drive remaining and weapon working. They've looked at Annie, with one side of drive not working and the weapon down. So they've gone more damaged. That's fine if that's their system. I'm fairly certain that Annie drove to the door afterwards without too many issues. As I recall, that right side of drive sort of recovered or whatever. I remember Ben saying it was a sticky gearbox or something similar, and once he got it moving, he was able to keep it moving to go in a fairly straight line to the door. So I don't think it's fair to say that if the fight goes on, Annie is then basically done. But I could be misremembering that. This is a long time ago now. I took notes as best I could, but I didn't get everything.
Yeah, but you're also using information obtained after the fight to sort of justify that, if that makes sense. It's sort of like, if you do look at where the fight ended, to all intents and purposes, Annie's right drive is gone. And I see what you're saying, where like I'm extrapolating from that to say it would have been counted out, and you know, in hindsight, maybe that wouldn't have been true. Maybe if it had carried on, that gearbox would have unstuck. But I think it's sort of, I don't know, it's tricky to sort of, how much does the events after the fight influence the decision? I don't know.
I think what you've said is probably the way it was looked at. I personally don't think that's fair. I think if that thing recovers without the builder touching it, then to me that is then not the damage it seemed it was. In the same way that something can stop working and start working again during the fight. If the judges decided to examine the robots physically, that is something that would then have changed that they would be looking at. So I see it as kind of the same thing. I then think, based on comments that were made around the gear down snappy decision, I think they counted Daedalus's movement as good control. And I also think they counted it as aggression. Both of which I strongly disagree with, but my assumption is that under their system, that was how that had to be scored or viewed. So again, don't hate the player, hate the game. If we have a system that gives us a result like this, blame the system. The people who are applying it as they should, they're just doing their jobs. And now I will explain the system I feel there should be. And any judge that doesn't follow it from now on, oh, God help them.
They will be judged accordingly.
I don't think, again, I don't know that they did, but for me, it's very clear that very little of what Daedalus did after it lost the wheel should be counted as aggression. Because spinning that weapon up and going into the wall to pinball around was basically the only way it had to stay in the fight. That's not aggression, that's survival. In terms of control, I think you have to give a little credit for being able to keep moving, but that does not in any way match or exceed the control that Annie has shown to be going around taking out multiple people's wheels and to be having a really good tussle with Sir Lancer Frog. Yeah, it has had controlled movement pretty much throughout the fight. On damage, I don't think you should be looking at how they end up. I think you should be looking at how they were at different stages of the fight. So yes, Annie is more damaged, but Annie has not spent more time more damaged. Annie was fully functional for, I think, almost 2 minutes of the fight. I'm going to check that because I have it written down. So yeah, Annie's weapon seems to stop around the 2-minute 10 mark in the fight. So for over 2/3 of the fight, Annie has been fully functional. Daedalus' wheel went after 25 seconds. For 5/6 of this fight, Daedalus has been surviving. And then, of course, we have the final sort of 5 seconds where Annie is in much more trouble. To me, that doesn't override what has happened in the rest of the fight. So for me, on all 3 categories, I'm giving it to Annie. I'm remaining mightily impressed by what Daedalus has achieved in the fight, but on all 3 sort of, categories, that's the word, it's Annie for me. But that's under the system that I think should be there, not the system that is.
Yeah, and I think what you've described would be a system that would result in the outcome that people would expect having watched this fight.
I've seen some people sort of comparing this to the Last Chance Rumble in BattleBots and the bombshell situation. I cannot overstate how different these two things are. They're both maybe an example of dodgy rules or systems resulting in an unexpected outcome, but they could not be more different. Daedalus has done a lot in this fight. Although I still think, again, I said I had this written down. I have Annie down as being responsible for Daedalus' wheel, for Drizzle's wheel, and also, albeit without the weapon, the killing of Sir Lancelot. I think you can give both of them some credit for Halo, because Annie gets a couple of hits on Halo, and after that it starts leaving weird marks on the floor, which to me is a clear sign that some bad damage has happened. And then when they collide with Daedalus, the wheel goes off and those marks get worse, if that makes sense. So that you kind of give that to both of them. Daedalus has done a lot of damage to robots that were already dead. And I don't know if that counts or not. This is another thing. I don't know how Rumble judging works. Are we looking almost entirely at what the 2 robots that were remaining did to each other? Are we worrying about what they did to robots that were still active? Or are we counting what they did to everybody, even a dead punching bag? I just don't know. And all of these things are going to hugely change the way you judge this fight.
Yeah. I think you sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit with, this is an unexpected outcome from a system being applied, really. I'd hope that this serves as a motivation to maybe reevaluate those rules, reevaluate the criteria for judging this kind of fight. I don't know how many other kind of like 10-way rumbles happen in beetle weights around the UK, but yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to consider.
That's the other solution to this, although probably not conducive to making something like Bogglebots. Most of the situations we see like this are gladiators. Gladiators have no time limit, they are to the death. So I don't know if there even is a system, because that is the only time we really do fights like these. Maybe this should have been to the death, although that probably means that you're going to get a winner that needs a lot of repairs and is kind of stifled in the next fight.
I think the problem with I think gladiators to the death kind of work for a live thing. I think they're probably harder to do if you want it to be entertaining on camera, because you could have a situation where you've got two robots crab walking around without their weapon, and what do you do in that situation? And that's kind of, there's a bit more interactivity, I guess, with a live audience, and so it's more viable there. But I think as soon as you record that and put it on YouTube, you've got a decision to make of, do you put the whole thing unedited on there? Well, not unedited, but you know what I mean, like the whole length of the fight in the episode, and then try and carry that with commentary? Or do you cut it down a bit, or do you reduce the end to highlights and then do that, which would obviously wind some people up, like the purists and the real fans and stuff would be like, I want to see the whole fight. I can imagine if they had a gladiator like with that went on for like 6 or 7 minutes and they cut it down, I can imagine that if no one else, would be upset about that. So I think it's a hard thing to know what to do with for a sort of production like this. And I think a 10-way with a time limit makes sense for Bogglebots. I think that's a sensible thing to have done.
Yeah, especially with the fact that these robots need to continue. A gladiator is usually the end of the day, everyone's going home anyway. I've also just realised that I've been massively biased by the Marlow Gladiator, which was, I think, one of the fastest anyone there had ever seen. And it did not end with two robots crab walking. It ended with one of the best pit shots we've ever seen.
That was a gladiator that ended within 3 minutes by itself. So it's like...
Yeah. Also, just to backtrack massively, I feel like in the interest of balance, when I was talking about what Annie and Daedalus did, I should have also mentioned that Daedalus obviously got those hits towards the end on Annie and did some damage. Should not overlook that. I'm coming at this with a bias, but I should minimise that bias.
I'm proud of you, man.
Here's a weird thing my brain has been doing about this fight.
Yeah?
This is completely irrational and not a feeling I'm proud of.
Oh, this is the best kind of thing.
Best kind of feeling. I would have felt better about this in the moment if they hadn't looked back at the footage. I would have been more able to accept it as I was sat there in the audience if they'd not been able to watch it again.
So I think what happened with the footage is that they have their criteria from their system that we've established we don't particularly agree with. And I think they watched it once following Daedalus and then once following Annie and made a decision based on that, which I think is a reasonable approach to take. It's basically what I did to try and understand what the judges did. It's like, I'm going to watch this once following Annie and I shall watch it once following Daedalus. It's like, actually, if you watch it with that context and sort of like looking at what each robot does individually, you can, that's sort of what led me to a similar conclusion. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree with basically everything you've said about the way the judging works, which is like, this is a fair decision, assuming, consistent with the way they seem to have judged previous fights and stuff. So it appears to be consistent with the criteria that they're following, but it's an indication that the criteria needs changing.
And now shall I take this off in a completely different direction?
By all means.
In my opinion, the two that were in the decision aside, Lancer Frog and Bourbon are the standout performers of this fight. Bourbon's got a heck of a kill count. It's taken out Gear down, it's crippled unconscious, and then it's also put Halo up on the wall.
Mm.
And then Lancer Frog has just Lancer Frogged around for the almost 3 minutes. I think would probably have been ahead on the scores right up until it got stuck.
Mm. Yeah, that thing's a tank, isn't it? I was very impressed by Lancer Frog surviving as long as it did. Did it actually die, or was am I getting this right? It was like high centered on something, wasn't it?
So it was high centered on the bearing from Bourbon's drum. But I believe from something that Nick said somewhere or other that he had lost a side of drive to Annie at that point.
Fair enough.
So his broken side was on the floor and his still working side was off the floor.
Does that count as a kill for Bourbon if it was Bourbon's bearing?
I mean, it supports my point of view, so yeah, why not?
Oh, Nick also something mentioned. I don't know if I should bring this up or not, but he mentioned something else in a chat somewhere that he reckons he hit the pit button at some point in this fight and it didn't go down.
Yes. So this was the fight where we learned. Actually, no, hang on. We may have learned this from our fight with Thunderchild, with all my confusion over who hit the pit button. The pit button is a button. It is not a prop that people contact and then a human goes, that was pressed. It is a button that is pressed, sends a signal, I believe, to the sound and lighting board at the back to then play an audio cue which makes Shane open the pit. Or possibly even open the pit automatically at some point.
I was going to say, if it doesn't, if it's capable of sending a signal to the audio desk, I feel like it should be sending a signal to open the pit. I have no idea.
It's what hardware you would have on the pit to do that.
Yeah, I have no idea what the mechanism is for opening that. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting point, that what a different fight this would have been had the pit opened.
What a worse fight it would have been. That's the thing that makes this so special.
I have no problem with the fact that it didn't open. I just think it's just a point of interest.
I would fully support either no pit for these fights, pit on a longer delay, or pit at the judge's discretion just to piss people off. Judges go, yeah, this is getting boring now, open the pit.
I think that would end badly. I don't think the judges should be in control of when the pit opens.
pit by competitor consensus?
I don't know, man. I feel like
Do all competitors agree that the pit shall be opened?
I think your initial suggestion of pit on a longer delay, I think that's the way to go for these.
Pit by audience vote?
What, are you going to give everyone little buttons?
Yeah, it'd be like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but deadlier.
Can you get the audience to close it again as well?
Just have the pit on a massive servo-like system so we can just open it a set amount.
You do Twitch plays Bugglebot's Pit.
Yes!
There's the system.
We need to make Shane build a full BattleBox replica at Beetleweight scale. And we'll have all of it controlled by the audience.
Oh, man, yeah. I'm sure that'd be really easy to do. Yeah, do it. Come on, Shane. Go.
Put your finger out. I think, unless you've got more to say, we've got through that much faster than I expected.
I think we're fine. I feel like we're in more agreement than maybe we were expecting. I don't know. And yeah, I think we've got through that in a reasonable amount of time with minimal controversy.
One closing thought I have. Please, 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 can somebody involved with the FRA put together and publish a high-quality, accessibly written document explaining how the judging system is meant to work?
Seconded.
It may exist, but if it does, I haven't been able to find it. And it existing and not being findable is basically nothing.
May as well not exist.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, but you used actual words. Oh, it's a good job there are no more judges' decisions. Oh, no!
Oh, dear.
At least this one's a bit easier.
Yeah, so we have I didn't write down the robots that are in this fight. We have the 6-way rumble. I don't know what these rumbles are called either. I can't remember anything. It's terrible.
So this is the Rumblebee. The 10-way was, I think, either the second chance or the last chance. I hope last, because second wouldn't make sense. Because some of the robots came through a melee, which was already their second chance.
Let's go with last chance rumble and then this one, the Rumblebee.
I'm going to try and do the 6 robots, and it's going to go really wrong.
I believe in you.
So for Team Spinner, we have Phoenix and Daedalus. For Team Non-Spinner, we have Laneheart, Rust in Pieces, Claws 2 and Jay.
Sounds about right.
So Claws 2, the grand finalist from Series 1.
You really double down on that, aren't you?
It's the new jellyfish meme.
That's the episode title. Clause 2, the grand finalist.
Clause 2 has maintained its placing from Series 1.
Yeah. Yeah, well done.
But it hasn't made it into a grand final episode, so... It's basically a step backwards.
Does it really count?
Which is producer interference.
It's just looking for controversy now.
We need some more. I guess the first thing to say is full credit to the Rust in Pieces team for taking the ant in. That's what we all really wanted to see. I also fully don't remember it being there.
No, I don't really recall it.
This actually is a fight, like you were saying with some others, where the footage says we were there, and I remember none of it.
Yeah, I think that's true for me as well. I remember the 10-way, remember this one less so.
Maybe we were still busy arguing about the 10-way when this was happening.
That's very possible.
Just there in the big hug circle with Ben. Oh, it is amazing, by the way, to see. I know I've said about it being a much bigger audience this year. You can tell that a lot of people were working on their robots while this was happening. Everyone that was in the 10-way is busy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how the audience fluctuates throughout all this.
Yeah, it's based mostly by how many roboteers are in the room. There's enough room for all of us. I think that's done quite intentionally so that we're not, sat in the aisles unless you're James, who just seems to love sitting in the aisles.
Oh dear, it's fun watching the audience, but we should try and remain focused on the Rumblebee.
The problem is I don't have that much to say about it.
I mean, to be honest, neither do I. I mean, my notes consist of Phoenix just sounds terrifying. I believe it's Phoenix making that horrible noise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very impressed by how much Claws just keeps driving at Daedalus. I think that's brilliant. And then obviously there's the pit drama with Claws near the end as well.
I mean, you say pit drama. It's not quite on the level of the Heat Melee's pit drama.
It's not quite as dramatic, but it is, it is funny watching Claws just kind of very slowly, but in a very controlled fashion, just sort of sliding around the thing. And then Daedalus sort of considering whether or not it's worth going in for another hit or not. And yeah, I think that's quite funny.
Cosmin's control in this fight. I said earlier about the 10-way was a sledgehammer being a sledgehammer. This fight, Daedalus is a sledgehammer being used as a scalpel.
This is a precision sledgehammer.
It really is. The hit to Phoenix's remaining wheel is beautiful. And the sort of fine control as he thinks about going in for those hits on clause 2. He gets very close to hitting a wall, which would have been danger, and just gets away at the last moment. It's so... Again, we've seen how nippy that robot is. We've seen how finicky it must be to drive, and Cosmin is just completely in charge.
I think that if Daedalus's wheel wasn't damaged, I think he would have been more likely to go for that hit. But I think well, certainly the thing that I was thinking when he was going for it is like one of your wheels is damaged, which means every time it rotates, your robot moves a bit, and then you get the gyro effect, and you might hit the floor. And so it's sort of like any time he's moving is kind of like a bit of a gamble about whether or not he's going to send himself flying. He does it amazingly well not to sort of keep control of the robot even when it's got all that stuff going on. And I think if the wheels were fully intact, I think he would have been more likely to go for it because he wouldn't have had quite as much risk of the robot sort of kamikazing rather than hitting claws.
I think this fight is too important for him to take that risk. He has won. The only way he loses is if he goes down the pit or goes out of the arena.
Yeah, not worth the risk.
He's done the right thing by just staying back. I'm overjoyed for Cosmin fighting his way through to the final. It's one of the most entertaining machines in the tournament that had a really harsh draw in the heat, and it will be a huge, huge asset. And I have to say that while I love non-spinners, I'm not sure that any of the non-spinners in this fight would have brought as much to the final as Daedalus does.
No, and it's an incredible story as well, fighting so many other robots to get there.
Oh!
And doing so many more fights just as well, regardless of how many robots are involved in it, just so many more fights. Daedalus is an amazing machine because it's still going strong. Like I get the impression that the only thing wrong with it at any point is the wheels, and it's like, well, I'm just going to go charge it up, replace the foam wheels, and then it's good to go again, as if it was brand new. It's ridiculous.
That is literally what he did after the 10-way. Just changed the wheel, charged battery, done. I mean, he probably checked some stuff as well, but that's just gravy.
Yeah, that's an amazing machine.
I honestly don't remember how most of the other robots died.
I think they were either sort of taken out by Daedalus or pitted by themselves or by Jay and stuff like.
Oh, well. Oh, yeah, sorry, that is accurate.
Yeah.
Although you didn't necessarily need themselves in that sentence. That was poetic. For Jay to pit itself, you live by the double pitting, you die by the double pitting.
I think one half of Rust in Pieces pitted itself.
Did it?
Yeah, I think one of them.
Oh, yeah, they were both kind of near, and then Jay came in to finish one off and went itself.
Yeah.
I think the other was kind of already done for by then.
Yeah, which ended up going in. In the act of trying to escape inevitability, it got sucked in.
They took it to Daedalus as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very impressed by everyone. Just like, no, we're just going to go for Daedalus. We're going to drive with the big spinners. I appreciated Jay going for Phoenix as well. Just being like, yeah, got a big spinner. It's going at full speed. Going to drive at it. I think, yeah, good stuff.
Strange choice, because of the two to be hit by, you'd think the wedge would rather be hit by the horizontal.
Yeah. That's not the wisest choice from a competitive point of view. Not that it, I feel like Phoenix didn't get a good bite anyway. Just sort of did some, just sort of like ground on the wedge for a little bit, but
just made some horrendous noises.
God, that thing makes such a noise. Yeah.
This was a really tough environment for Jay in particular. It could deal with the spinners. It was always a question of whether it was going to be able to deal with the non-spinners. It's like, it can survive hits, but as a wedge, it can't really control other wedges. It's struggling for pushing power. I think the weight distribution, the front being quite heavy, already limits grip. And once there's another robot on there, it does start to really struggle.
Yeah.
But it could have put Daedalus out of this fight, and that's what everyone wanted to see.
Could have done. Are you happy with the judge's decision in this fight?
No, Annie was robbed. Yes. Very, very... well, happy implies that I wanted Clause 2 to lose. I am in agreement with this decision. I cannot criticise it.
That is an accurate summary of my feelings also.
And with that, our episode must peter out because there's nothing left.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think we're done. That's it for the coverage of this episode of Bogglebots.
Who are we rooting for in the final? Ignoring the fact that we know who wins.
Who is in the final? I can't remember.
So we have Thunderchild, Splody Boy, K2, Sore Loser, Daedalus, and Mini Spinning Book 2.
Ooh, that's hard. I kind of want... Sore Loser, I think, is probably who I'd be behind. I'd like to see Sore Loser win.
I think I was backing... Obviously, I was backing Thunderchild.
You shock me.
Because we want to have lost to the champ, ideally. And also, Nate is our pit buddy. You got to root for him.
Mm.
I think I was also going for Splody Boy as well.
Yeah, Splody Boy.
I think it's been really overlooked that Splody Boy is a first-time Beetle. Jeremy's done a lot of stuff in Outweights, but it is his first Beetle, and it's done superbly.
It's such a great robot as well. I think I said this last time we spoke about it. I can't believe how low down the weapon is.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but the one issue they had in the test box was they managed to sort of get stuck under the wall. That's how low the weapon is. It just drove straight out. Not spun up at the time, thankfully.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, as a robot that walked its heat, I was definitely excited to see more.
Yeah, I'd be happy with any of them to win, I think. Well, here we are. It's the end of the show. Are we done with Buggerbot stuff?
We can be done with Buggerbot stuff, yeah.
Do you have any more to say? You're welcome to say more.
I was going to hype the grand final a bit, but everyone's hyped already. It's the grand final. Everyone knows the robots are in there. Everyone knows it's going to produce some great fights.
Tune in next week. Right. Well, so before we end the show, then I have a podcast recommendation I'd like to make to the world. For those of you that listen just using your web browser, you can do so for this podcast. It does have a website with a player on it.
I love that you checked.
Well, of course I checked. As far as I'm aware, it's not on YouTube, I'm afraid. This is a proper podcast that exists primarily
dang it.
in podcast apps. There's a podcast called Two-Headed Girl, and it's been going on for a little while. There's a number of episodes. They're all quite short, and I think they're really worth listening to. They are. So yeah, this has been recorded over a long time, and it's recordings of conversations between Alex Cox and Matty Cox, and it's conversations around Matty's transition from being a woman to being a man. I guess I feel like we're gonna have to walk the tightrope here. We're gonna have to be confident in the terminology we use, and if we say something that is not quite how it should be said, we apologise. That's just our ignorance. Yeah. So this is part of why I sort of thought I'd start listening to it. So I know of Alex Cox because I listened to another podcast called Do by Friday, and she's on that, and it's very funny. And then she tweeted at some point. I had this podcast has been going on for a while, but she tweeted recently about this, and I happened to see it and listened to it. And yeah, so this whole kind of field of LGBTQ stuff is just a world of just unknown things to me, and so listening to this is really interesting just to sort of get a better sense of what it's like. This is an emotional podcast. I think I cried in the second episode. There's a lot to it, but it is really interesting, and yeah, I think worth your time to listen to.
It's interesting to me. I sort of not rushed through, but not binged through either. I listened to a couple of episodes today, ready to talk about. It was interesting because you made this recommendation with no information. So I was listening to it going, does Sam want to talk about the content or does Sam want to talk about the production? And I'm glad it was the content, but I do feel like we should talk about the production for a second. It makes a lot more sense now that you've said that one of the people already does a podcast. This is such a cool podcast concept. This idea of basically recording a lot of conversations over time and then stitching them together into a cohesive narrative. It's an amazing way of doing things, and the result as you said, is a very emotionally charged podcast.
Yeah.
I think the thing that struck me is that I think in episodes 2 and 3, there are parts that are basically an argument,
Yeah.
but a really respectfully had argument, a disagreement, but also more than a disagreement, which is the sort of thing that that is the sort of thing you cannot do on a podcast like this, where you sit down on a day and a time to talk about a thing.
Yeah, so one of the early conversations that's a bit like that is a conversation around how Alex refers to Matty in terms of their relationship, because they're married, and they were married as a lesbian couple for a long time before Matty transitioned. And so Alex has the habit, or had the habit, of referring to him as her wife. And it's a really sort of very genuine kind of conversation that they have, where Alex sort of feels like she's doing all right with the terminology, and Matty's like, no, you call me wife, you refer to me as your wife a lot more than you think you do. And I thought that was that sort of like really, that conversation really sold this to me as this is a genuine podcast. They're not I don't feel like they're sort of hamming anything up or anything. It does just feel like a genuine kind of conversation between these two people, done in a very, respectful way, but they have their disagreements about it. And I think it's kind of an amazing privilege in some ways to be able to listen to that sort of process of discovery for both of them, because it's obviously a hard transition for everyone involved.
That conversation is basically the most intimate conversation two people could choose to share.
Yeah.
And it blows me away that they've done that, and I respect the hell out of it. And it's interesting that I listen to other podcasts on similar topics, and they tend to be, at times, almost painfully whimsical. It's like, hey, this is a fun topic, kind of not really, but we're going to have fun with it, which I completely understand the drive to do, and it results in some really good stuff, and this is so far in the other direction, and that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like half glowing review, half two people don't know how to compliment the thing.
I think it's a great podcast. So I don't think we should ramble on too much more about it. I think it's worth listening to. I think it can be helpful for a lot of people for all kinds of different reasons. I think it's certainly helpful for me to get a better understanding of the things that people go through and to have more empathy for people. I think that's an important muscle to exercise and an important thing to sort of develop is having empathy for people. And I think this is a really interesting podcast to listen to in that vein. I think it could be helpful if you're going through a similar thing in your life, to sort of hear how it went for other people and stuff. Is obviously, I imagine, a lot of help there as well. So I just think it's worth listening to for everyone for all kinds of different reasons. And there will be a link in the show notes. One
warning I would like to give.
Yeah.
Oh wow, it's not really a warning, but I regretted listening to this on the way to work.
Sorry.
It's like it's funny, but it's also not funny. I would only listen to this when you know you're going to have time to process anything that you might hear.
Yeah.
This isn't easy listening. This is like an audio documentary on a very serious topic. So don't take it lightly.
Yeah, so there's been situations where like it's come on when I'm driving. It's like, nope, this is not the right time for this podcast.
Yeah.
And like I said, like it's made me cry listening to this a few times. Like it's a very emotional podcast. So yeah, make sure you're in the right frame of mind to listen to it. So with that done, you can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/67. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us whatever you feel like, because I didn't think about this a whole time. Damn it.